Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sam Bass. I'm with the Market Intelligence team here at Open Minds. And today, as part of our weekly Circle Elite Executive Roundtable series, we have Acenda Health's Chief Operating Officer, Melissa Fox, with Open Minds Senior Associate, David Blazak, and they will be discussing the Acenda Advanced Leadership Development Program. Melissa Fox currently oversees the agency operations, including health information technology, for over 100 programs throughout 13 counties in New Jersey. Under Melissa's leadership, the Acenda team has launched several innovative initiatives which have furthered the implementation of integrated care models for vulnerable and historically disenfranchised populations. Melissa has a distinguished career of over 20 years leading innovations in healthcare operations, including federally qualified health centers, healthcare for the homeless, behavioral health, home care, and hospice. David Blazak brings over 20 years of experience in the health and human service industry to Open Minds team with expertise in state and federal governments, market strategy, healthcare policy, and reimbursement and regulatory trends. He currently serves as Senior Associate with Open Minds. Now today, before we get started, I have a couple of brief housekeeping reminders. First, while you are muted during today's briefing, we are open to any questions you might have or any comments you might have. Please feel free to submit those in the chat or question box. And secondly, as a reminder, the PowerPoint and recording from today's webinar will be available tomorrow on the Open Minds website. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Melissa and David.
Thank you very much. So excited to be a part of this today. Actually, my slides just disappeared here. Let's give that another try. There we go. So really excited to be here today talking with all of you about the Advanced Leadership program, because it's been something that, this has been a long time coming. This is something that really developed within the context of a larger agency initiative and focus on our leadership. So we'll talk a little bit about that today, and really how you can start to apply this to your organizations to really cultivate what it says here, your next generation leadership. We know that our agencies today don't look like what they did yesterday. And we're quite certain that tomorrow they're not going to look like what they do today. And so there are a lot of external factors that are affecting what we're doing right now. So we really are focusing as leaders on how do we make sure that we're developing the best leadership possible to lead our agencies forward throughout the tumultuous change that's occurring in our industries. So that's what we really focused on for Acenda, is really how to cultivate this next gen leadership. So throughout this discussion, here's what I'm hoping that we're all going to be able to get to together. First, really, how did we develop our internal strategies related to this mid-level leadership planning, and how you can also do that same thing for your organizations. What was the structure and the purpose of Acenda Advanced? Why do we even do it? Why even bother doing something like this? We have robust training programs, especially if you're within the clinical realm. Why was it necessary to do something extra for these mid-level leaders? And we're going to talk a little bit about that and why we created it the way that we did. How to look internally within your organization, similar to what we had to do, and really with some brutal honesty at times, to determine what our needs were, what our shortfalls were, what the opportunities were, and then how to apply that to a really robust leadership program with meaning. And then what resources might you need to move this to the next level. I'm really, really hoping, and we're gonna have a great discussion at the end about how we challenge ourselves to go deep with that and how we get really innovative with doing so. So before I get into all that, who is Acenda Integrated Health? So, it says here, we're in 12 counties, over 100 programs, and endless commitment. And that is what we're about. We are all heart. We're throughout many counties in New Jersey, and we do provide what we like to refer to as programs that are designed to keep families and individuals well, keep them in their communities together. So we provide a wide spectrum of programming, everything from residential programming to in-home visitation, substance use disorder treatment, mental health outpatient, maternal health programs, so really a prevention programming, really a wide range, but we interact with people who are at their most vulnerable. And so the populations that we serve are highly complex, which means that our teams are constantly burdened with not only what's going on, but with changing regulatory standards, with changing expectations from a state and federal perspective, and then also our own internal demands. So very highly complex in terms of what we do, because we want to make sure that we were providing the best services possible for the people we serve. They deserve it, they need it, and so we're looking to be there to provide it. But that also meant that our teams were being pressured a bit more. So this is our commitment. Within our agency, this is really how we think about our leadership. We know that one of the highest callings, and I'm sure a lot of you believe the same thing, the highest calling as a leader is really to continue to develop people within the agency. That is the strength of your agency. That is the strength of your organization, making sure that your leaders are fully equipped, fully trained, and fully ready for the changes that come. That's important, and it's something that some leaders disregard, and they figure the training's there, that should be fine, or they'll find it, or people should just come with the leadership trait inbred. That's not the case. Many times folks just need the structure, they need the support, and they need the confidence to be able to step into the leadership roles that we need them to, because as we continue to grow, our growth is based upon their being prepared to lead us forward, or else we'll run into what I'm sure a lot of you run into, which is the negative talk, which is this is too much. We can't deal with this. We need to be who we used to be. Why change? So if you have the right leadership in place, it will help to address some of those very issues that we tend to run into on a regular basis. So this is where we started, and I'm sure a lot of this is going to look familiar to many of you on the line today. So we had a lot of, I think I may have lost, did I lose my presentation, or can you all see it?
Nope, we can see it. You're good.
We can see it.
Okay, so it may just be me then. And it's so funny because I said this was going to happen, that something weird was going to occur. So I'm going to go back here from this current slide. So can you all see the significant internal change?
Yes.
Wonderful. So this is where we started. We had a lot going on. We had gone through a couple of acquisitions. We acquired some organizations. We changed how we were configured internally. I mean, there really was a lot of movement going on. And so our leaders were feeling that, because they were not only getting it from us top down, but they were getting it from bottom up and from their teams. Why are we having to deal with this? Why do we have to change something else? Yet another EHR transition. They were really challenged with having to walk that line between being a great team player and being supportive of their teams, and then really dealing with their own internal, leadership struggles as well. We also had external market factors that were affecting how we were delivering care. So we weren't the only ones, and I'm sure a lot of you know, the healthcare industry, of course, is being affected by traditional players as well as the non-traditional players. So because that was coming in, and they were being much more aggressive about, and this is what the third point speaks to, they were being more aggressive about hiring some of the same from the same leadership pool that we were looking to hire. It was very, very competitive. So we had to understand how to be a little bit more strategic with how we were bringing up leaders, and how we were talking to our leaders, and how we were developing them, and making sure that we were retaining them, because they were really important to the agency. And we also had this highly competitive environment, and that's what I just spoke to. I mean, there was a lot going on with COVID-19, lots of shortages, staffing shortages. We really wanted to make sure that we kept the great people with us, because as you all know, it's more expensive to try to find new folks to bring in to try to recruit. It's much more cost effective, much more efficient for the agency if we were able to make sure that we kept the folks with us who we wanted to keep with us and who wanted to be with the agency. So that's really where we started. There were a lot of factors that were going on and coming to bear at the exact same time, and it was all putting a lot of pressure on our leadership. And we were seeing some people fall away, and we were losing some of the folks we really didn't want to lose. So we knew that we had to put something in place to try to address that and stop it in its tracks. So there was a lot of talk, and I mentioned this, Acenda Advanced developed within a larger context of the items that I just mentioned. There was actually a 2-year process that we put into place as an agency, where we really looked at how can we make sure that our leaders are feeling engaged? How do we make sure that our leaders have a voice and that they feel like they're being developed in a way that they hadn't been before? And we also looked externally because, myself and many of you on the lines, and, you'll be involved in this next week, where we have the opportunity as leaders and as executive leaders to go off-site and to be away from our programs because we have the flexibility to do so. A lot of our really strong leaders did not. A lot of our really strong leaders, because they were engaged in productivity or engaged in activities where they needed to be more connected to home base, so to speak, did not have the flexibility to be away for 2 or 3 days for these really robust, exciting training programs that exist. They needed to be really close to their teams, especially with all the change going on. So we challenged ourselves on how can we create something that gives that same sort of feel, that gives that same sort of engagement and excitement and the team building that we see in some of those other off-site programs that can last up to a week. How can we do that within this kind of an environment? And so that's where Acenda Advance came from. We wanted to create something, and we did create something that would allow these mid-level leaders to really gain some additional value that they hadn't been able to get before through other training programs. We wanted to make sure that we were promoting their professional development. So not just their clinical development, but also allow them to understand concepts that maybe have seemed foreign to them because of what they do, or may have seemed a little bit frightening to them in some ways, but make it real and apply it to them in a very, very specific way. And one of the things that off the top of my head I think about is finance. Sometimes some of our leaders are very intimidated by the idea of the financial workings of an agency, but it's very important that they get it because they are the ones who then are able to champion different ideas, different thoughts, different approaches and strategies to their teams, which then relieves some of the pressure that we all hear about. And we really wanted them to think outside of the box and be okay with innovation. Think outside of their day-to-day roles and understand how what they do is tied to the larger agency. Now, these things that I'm talking about right now are probably things that you've talked about to your leadership teams many times. We've talked to them about it as well, but we all know that it's very easy to talk about those things, but with the day-to-day workings that go on, they are also very easy to fall away. So we wanted to build a structure where it would be a little bit more sticky. And they would really be able to connect it to what they were doing in a way that was pretty powerful, we were hoping. So the key components of the Acenda Advance, and this is at a very high level because there's lots of pieces to it, were really strategic in terms of what we developed. So the first part was a peer nomination process. So from the very beginning, we wanted to engage them in feeling like this was very special, that they were really in something that was important not just to them, but was important at the highest levels of the agency. And so we wanted them to really feel special. So they were nominated by their own groups. So we actually reached out and said, okay, who within your teams do you see as the leaders? Who are the ones who have the voices? And this was also very important because that told us who the key influencers were within these teams. And that's something for all of you to think about as well. We all know that there can be negative leaders within these groups, and if you're able to take that voice and make it a powerful voice for you, it can be powerful for the agency. So we wanted to know who are the people that you turn to if you have a question, who are the people that you feel more comfortable going to if there are some concerns. And so we got those names, and a lot of the time we saw within one group the same name came up. And then we rolled that up to their directors and up to their supervisors and asked them to make the nominations. And so the nominations that they made had a few different components to them, and we got probably close to 30 nominations. And the nominations we were asking them to, let us know what is it about their leadership potential that is so strong, and some very targeted questions to get some evidence of, what they would bring to the table. The other thing that was very important was that we went across all departments, all divisions. So IT, HR, as well as the programmatic divisions were invited to bring someone to this process. That is what we wanted to do because we know that there are leaders within every corner of the agency, and we did not want anyone to feel excluded. And we also wanted a very robust conversation around, what leadership looks like, what it is, and how we can improve it within the agency. So the cohort was only 10 members, so it was very competitive. We promoted via our leadership forums and our ACE, which is our intra-agency site. We then had these review sessions, which was I think it was probably about 9 or 11 people or so, secret group, but they were across different departments, across different divisions, and they were able to vote on, who they thought was the best, and through a scoring system. And those scores were rolled up, and of those scores, the 10 people were selected. And so from that, then they moved into their 6-month leadership track. So this leadership track is it's built to be really fun, very interactive, and able to work within their existing schedule. So these leadership tracks, every month, they have a few assignments that they're required to do. One of those assignments will be to work within our Acenda Institute of Health Innovation in whatever way they choose to, and that's been really exciting. They also get one-on-one webinars with highest levels of leadership in the agency. So our CEO, Dr. Anthony DeFabio, had the first one. They were bowled away by the fact that they had an in-person audience with these 10 leaders with the CEO of the organization. He was able to present to them on compassionate leadership. They were able to ask him questions, get his feedback, and they were blown away. I worked with them on strategic development strategy, developing strategies. And so we had other senior leaders who have done the same. So every month they get that. Every month they get these different types of lessons. And they also are required to interact with each other within a specialized intra-agency forum that is designed just for the advanced cohort. So there are a lot of program components to this, but all designed to strengthen them and strengthen their leadership potential. So these are some of the elements that are involved in the leadership track. When they first come on and when they're selected, and again, we make them feel very special. They got a special invitation and a special package, just to say congratulations. And as part of that first month, we did conduct a baseline assessment. We wanted to know about them and how they saw themselves as leaders, and then also what they wanted to learn through this process, what types of leaders they want to become. This was very important because at the end of it, we also do an enter and exit assessment to see if they achieved their goals. And then that official assessment was then put in their official HR record. So shared with their direct supervisors, so it can be included as part of their leadership development plan. So not only did they feed into it, but we're holding ourselves accountable as leaders to help further them in that process. And that makes us all feel connected. I mentioned the private intra-agency, and that's their advanced portal that they use, which they totally love. I mentioned here the executive mentoring program. These are the sessions that we worked on. And I also talked a little bit about the Acenda Institute of Health Innovation. So that is something that we just launched, very excited about it. And this is a way for our leaders to get involved in a different way and to have their voices heard in a different way. But importantly for the cohort, for our advanced cohort, they are able to pick specific areas, and they've already gotten involved in projects to move the AIHI forward. So they've come up with policy projects. You have IT people who are informing health projects. It is absolutely amazing in terms of what they've come up with and how they work together to develop them. So it's going to have long-lasting impact in terms of what they're doing and what they're contributing. So here's the benefits that we're seeing already and that we're hoping to continue to see. It really broadens their view of leadership, and it broadens their view of what operations means within the context of our organization. It has broadened their view and broadened their perception of what they bring to the table and therefore what their teams are contributing. It makes them much more connected. We're giving them a personal development plan that they'll be able to hold in their hands and use in conversations with their supervisors as they continue to grow and as they continue to develop. Again, we're investing in them as Acenda, they're investing with us as well. So we're supporting each other through this process. It's really promoting their visibility and their self-awareness of how important their role is within the agency. We also are giving them an award. At the end of the whole process, they get a graduation, they get face time with our board, they get featured on our intra-agency website, and then a participation bonus for some of their time. And this also gives them an opportunity to enhance their professional bio. So they can add this into their bio that they've gone through this process. So we really look forward to be robust, and we look to give them a reason for staying connected to Acenda and staying connected and engaged to what we can offer them. And then they grow as we grow. So we're already starting to see some great results to this. And again, I just want to emphasize that this is operating within a larger context that we've really instituted throughout the agency in terms of leadership development. But specifically for Acenda Advanced, we're even seeing this for folks who are not involved with the cohort, which is wonderful. We're seeing folks talk about this even more, get excited about it. When we first launched and announced who these people were, because their peers were the ones who nominated them, so to speak, they were embracing of them. They were embracing of it, and they're excited to hear about the progress that they're making. So such positive feedback. We're already, as I mentioned, getting some innovations in terms of how we can start to do programs differently, what we can do differently from our communities just out of this 10-member cohort. And they are also engaging folks who are not in the cohort and people who are in their teams across the agency to get involved in some of these processes as well. And then we've also stabilized a lot of what we were starting to see, and we're still waiting for some of those numbers to come back, but we know just anecdotally through some of our higher level leaders that they're not seeing the same level of angst that they were seeing before. Now, we still had that, don't get me wrong. This has not fixed everything, and this is a long process. We're in it for the long haul, but the early signs are already telling us that this, along with some of the other things that we're doing, are having an impact. We just had a recent supervisor survey, and I think that some of the most positive responses we've seen in quite some time. So the early results and the early feedback are very, very positive. So, as a whole, what I can definitely say, and I know Dr. DeFabio would say the same thing if he were here, that the investment has been well worth the return. And so we're going to continue to invest our time, continue to invest our efforts in how we are developing our leaders and really keeping a very close eye, especially on the advanced team and the advanced cohort, and even having them inform future cohorts and how we continue to make it stronger and make it even better for all of them. So I'm going to stop share. And then David, that's my truth. I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Melissa. That's an excellent presentation, and I guess what I'll start off with, maybe in our conversation in having a discussion about this, is in my career in healthcare, I have probably never seen as much change in healthcare as I've seen especially the last 5 years, maybe more. Not just COVID, but value-based reimbursement kickstarted a lot of change in healthcare. We've seen a lot of mergers and acquisitions. In behavioral health, we're at a record clip right now in investments in behavioral health organizations. So with all this change that's happening in healthcare, how important does this become, the Acenda Advanced program? And is it just outside of all the changes happening? Maybe you can talk about how important it does become because of everything we're seeing now in healthcare, rapidly changing, and you have to adjust to this environment. Maybe talk a little bit about that and how that helps having this sort of program.
Oh, wow. I mean, you really just touched on it, David. I mean, there was no time, now's the time to really have something like this because there is so much change. I'm going to date myself a little bit, and, Sam already did, saying I've been over 20 years in the industry, but what I will say is, I used to say 10 years ago, oh, this is the craziest time I've ever seen in healthcare. This was the wildest time. And I have to say that now it's something I would have not expected. And I think COVID's exacerbated certain things, but there are also some great conversations that are being had that need to be had. But what does that mean? That means that the folks who are coming in, and even as the educational programs that they're going through, have not necessarily changed to reflect these changes. Everything that's happening in the industry is happening too quickly. So the programs that these folks are coming through, and there's some really good ones out there, don't all necessarily take that into consideration or all necessarily work to infuse what leadership is and what leadership should be and could be within our sector. So to be able to create something that's that's designed for different levels of staff, not just for the highest levels of the agency, which is important, don't get me wrong, but we get access to lots of training. We get access and we have time to be able to educate ourselves in different ways. But when you're telling a staff or a director who has, 20 or 30 staff that they're working with who are already, put upon because they have so much regulatory and programmatic, levels of service that they have to make, and all these other things going on, they really have to be prepared for that. And so with the change that's occurring, I think now is more important than ever. And now it's upon, us as leaders to be courageous about putting certain programs like this into place. And you can do it in a way where it doesn't decrease your dollar. You can do it in a way where it doesn't impact you negatively financially. And that's what we've looked to do with Advance.
Great. You mentioned before that part of the process, you have a lot of the peers that recommend people within the organization to be a part of this program. Are there certain characteristics of people that go through the program? Does it range in a variety? I know you mentioned it's for all different levels and all different positions, which is great. And as you mentioned, this helps adapt to different change that's happening within the healthcare sector, and it prepares an organization appropriately to adapt to those changes. But are there certain core characteristics that you look for, or is it just, you know, kind of for everybody, and you can shape those people in the program?
Well, that's a great question. And you know, it's funny, as they move up through the process, it almost weaned itself out. So, you know, at first it's just who are the voices, who are the people that folks trust and go to. By the time it gets to the level of the group that's reviewing the information that's submitted, we are looking for very specific instances and evidence of engagement. So we want to see that they're engaged. So we want to have people in the cohort who are open, even if they're not fully ready to be at a level where they hope to be. But they're open to hearing, and they've already demonstrated that by being a little bit out of the box with how they think within their programs, being a little bit out of the box within their departments, with, you know, trying to get involved and showing that they're committed to the agency because they go a little bit beyond. You know, they're the ones who are willing to. We're not talking about giving more hours, because, you know, we do focus on work-life balance. But even within the time that they have, you know, how do they say, you know what, I have a little bit of time, let me kind of jump in and help you with this. Or I saw that my peer was having a problem with sorting this issue out, so I went, you know, outside of my own day-to-day to assist them, especially if it goes across departments and programs. So we were looking for specific evidence of not only engagement, but commitment to the agency beyond just, you know, head down and I'm doing what my job is. We value that. And then don't get me wrong, we value people who work hard. We value people who are committed to doing their jobs every day. But when you have the 10-member cohort out of the, you know, almost 1,000 people that we have working for us, we wanted to make sure that these were the folks who came to the table ready to roll, came to the table with a heart open to at least moving it forward. And that's what helps us to make sure that it's a very special, you know, perception of a level of ownership and achievement to even be in Advance. And that's why we look for those things.
Great. And the impact it has, and having such a program, I mean, it can have such an impact financially. I ran my own company for years. I've been a partner in a consulting firm, and one of the most important things you can do is develop talent, retain talent within an organization. Sometimes it gets overlooked, but it is one of the most important things I think an organization can do in preparing for the future and adapting to changes. You know, is there a success story maybe you can share at Acenda? Acenda has a wonderful program, a very structured program that's set up. And I know personally how financially it can impact an organization if it's not done right. So maybe you can share some sort of a success story and how that has impacted the organization. That'd be great.
Yeah, well, specifically for Advance, I got to tell you, I'm so blown away, and I touched a little bit on a couple of things, but just some of the things that they've come up with and they've already started to doing, and I'll share one. One is he's an advanced cohort, and he actually is from our IT team. And I'm not going to say his name, you know, I wish he was on the call. He's such an amazingly smart guy, and he's done so many wonderful things already for the agency. And he's one of those people that's kind of quiet. He's the, you know, the quiet storm. You know, he doesn't say a lot in meetings, but he has so much, you know, that's going on. And so he was able to, and he took the initiative based on what he's learned and been exposed to within Acenda Advance, identify this tool and this mechanism. And I know I'm totally going to mess this up, and so please forgive me if you're looking at this. But he was able to find this tool to allow them to sift data and to analyze data where you can identify folks who may be having issues with paying their higher energy costs, and folks who may be from a social determinants factor. And why that, you're like, oh, why is that important? That's extremely important because we've seen that people who are in lower income homes and lower income communities tend to pay more for energy. And what that does is translate into higher issues with health, heart issues, lung issues, et cetera. So we have an initiative that we have in place where this is going to help to inform. We've been able to get some funding. We're going to be launching it within the next month or so. So very, very excited about what he's been able to find, and we're going to be able to put that to use with this new program that we just got funding for. So wonderful.
Great example. Sam, do we have any questions in queue? Maybe we can jump into any questions anybody has right now, if that's the case.
Hey, yep, we've got a handful of questions. First one, Melissa, great presentation so far. So how many, here, I actually use a couple of questions bundled together here. How many total staff and mid-level leaders does Acenda Health have? And then how did you determine the 10 for the cohort?
Yes, so total staff, we have close to 1,000 staff total. And in terms of the leadership pool that we're talking about, that probably is around 300 to 400 people. So we have a nice little, maybe a little bit more when you add in some of the other external, departments, et cetera. So it's a really robust group. I'd say probably leaning more towards the 400 or so people. And the way that we just selected the 10 is what I said, the teams at first reached out to them and said, let us know who are the people that you go to for advice? Who are the people whose words you trust? Who are the folks who are the influencers? And that, I think, was so important to starting this process, because once we understood who the influencers were, that helped to, really help us hone in on the voices. And so we get those voices, and those voices are going to be the ones that when they come out of the cohort, so this is the investment as well, when they come out of the cohort, when they graduate from the cohort, they can be the champions for what they learned going back to their teams. And this doesn't mean that they have to be in a level of high level, executive leadership. These are still the voices who are extremely important. So we really took the concepts that we've learned with doing community-based care, where you're engaging folks in the community to help to further messages or get health messages out, these community influencers. We took that same approach and brought it internally to the agency. So that's really how we took that pool and whittled it down to the 10. And let me tell you, that was a tough process. And having those folks around the table really talking about, the scoring and, what is the best way. And it was very, very close, at the end. So we're really looking forward to a lot of those people who were not able to make it in the first cohort to be able to get it into the one next year. And there was a very specific reason we kept it to 6 months, and we can talk about that a little bit later.
Gotcha. And I guess, so another part of that question is, for maybe not for the 10 individuals, but the number 10, was that determined as like a reasonable number that could be managed, or, how did you get to the number that you would select 10 at all?
Great question. We wanted it to be a nice number that, to your point, very manageable. And we wanted them to feel connected. So we didn't want them to get too lost in a very large group. So if you have a large group of 15 people, 20 people, it's going to be very easy for the folks who are a little bit quieter, a little bit less likely to get involved, to kind of fall into the background. We wanted it to be enough where they could really engage with each other, and they have. And that's, watching them work with each other is pretty amazing. There was one project that we did, and this was my month for strategic planning, where I gave them this exercise. They each were running a circus. Okay, so appropriate on a couple different levels, but they had to run their aspect of a circus, and they each had a part to do. And so they had to join up in their teams. So the 10 number allowed us to make these little teams of 2. And so their teams had to come up with, whatever they needed to do to make the circus run. So, so the 10 just gives us the ability to make these teams when we need to, and not too large where folks get lost in the background.
Perfect. No, that makes total sense. And then when you're conducting the baseline assessment, were there any tools that were used, or how did you determine how to conduct that?
So yes, great question again. We provided that to them online. So, and it was something we created. So as leadership, there's some things we wanted to know. Some of it was about us as an agency. What is it that you need? But it really was totally focused on them. And we looked at a few different leadership assessments that were out there, and really kind of picked and chose, what would work for us and what would work for the kind of diverse types of leaders that we had on board. And it really was focused on a lot of introspection on their part, like for them to understand who they were, who they wanted to be, what challenges did they see, and that's where we did. So we pulled it from different places and then added a little bit based on the configuration of Acenda.
Okay, great. And then, okay, here's a question kind of on similar lines. What types of resources did it take to develop the program? You know, what was like the staff element going into it and creating it, time, cost? And then was there any consideration for the cost effectiveness as opposed to going to like an external consulting company to do something similar?
Yes, there was a big consideration of that. So we really use a lot of our internal resources. And let me tell you, we have this amazing marketing and development department. Mary and her team, they invested a lot of time in developing, Sandra and all of them, they invested a lot of time developing the intranet for the agency, which is an offshoot of our existing intranet. So they built another little portal that was designed for them. So it was an investment of time on our marketing team's part. Our CEO, actually all of our senior level leadership have added their time and resources to identifying what topics they wanted to talk about, and then, you know, adding them there. And then there was a group of us who just, you know, developed all the paperwork and working with marketing. I mean, it was truly an all hands on board to develop this. And then once we're able to develop it, it really is able to almost run on its own because the schedule is predetermined, the assignments are predetermined. It is programmed through our intranet to pop up and send messages to the participants and to the cohort on a monthly basis, so they know, and even on a weekly basis, so they know what's coming. So it doesn't require a lot of hands-on, except where we choose to, and that's where we have our monthly webinars. We jump into their intranet all the time, like I'm in there all the time, you know, asking them different questions, and Anthony's dropped you know, some notes in there about the videos that they've seen, so they feel connected to us even though they're not really seeing us all the time. That is a much better and probably a lower investment. There's some soft costs involved, of course, but we're all working anyway, so we just really redirected our energy, so to speak. So that was really great for us. Now, some organizations, it may be better for you to go outside. For us, because we knew what our agency needed, it made sense for us just to apply our time that way. And I really wish I could share with all of you what the Acenda Advanced portal looks like. It's really cool. It's totally automated, and it truly emphasizes and plays upon the whole kind of social media, you know, environment that we have right now. And so they seem to really like it.
Just a quick question. So after they graduate from the program, do they retain access to that advanced leadership portal? So is it like an ongoing?
What they will is coaches. So they'll be in
Okay.
a different, they'll be in a different set, kind of like me, when I can come in and I can add some different things, but they won't necessarily get the alerts for the assignments because, you know, they're no longer in it. But what we're hoping is that they will then become coaches and really mentors for the folks who are to come. It's not required, but that is what we're going to offer them the opportunity to do.
That's great. And what cohort number are you on right now?
So this is, like I said, this is our first one.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
we're wrapping it up. And so it's been amazing to watch this process. This piece is part of this larger process. It's just so rewarding, and we're getting such great feedback. And so we're really looking forward to rolling it out for the next 6 months.
Okay, gotcha. Sorry, I missed that. And so here's one another question is, was all the training provided by agency leaders, or were there some external trainers utilized as well?
So there was a combination. So the kind of live training we did. So we wanted that to be personal. Anthony had his one-on-one. Jim, the director of government affairs, he's going to be doing his one-on-one. I did mine through Zoom. So a lot of it was that. We did provide them with external video clips to watch or articles to read. And so then they had to respond to that. So if there was an article that we provided around, you know, finance, nonprofit finance, a video around nonprofit finance, then there was a specific follow-up question that went into their intranet. And so we're going to be engaging with them, or we've engaged with them to kind of talk about that and get their feedback. But that is the other training that's been used. But a lot of the face-to-face, one-on-one was leadership. And they seem to really value that because it shows them they have our time, they have our support, and we're committed to their success, which is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. So if hypothetically, if there was a organization that was smaller than yours, like half or a quarter of the size, I'm sure there were some growing pains and learning experiences throughout the process. Is there anything that some high level things to look out for when implementing a program like this?
I would say messaging. I would say one of the things that is really important is messaging. And the reason why is because you set the tone from the very beginning, not just for the folks who are coming into the cohort, but the folks who are aspiring to be a part of the cohort, and for your leadership and their support of the cohort. So folks are watching all the time, and we all know this. They're watching to see if our words match our actions. And so that is why through the advanced program, we were very careful about how we messaged up front, but I think there were some ways that we could have improved that. Not anything major, not anything that totally, derailed the process, but I think there were some different ways that we maybe could have talked about it a little bit more, talked about it differently, that would have gotten even more folks, engaged. But even the way that it still was very positive. But I would say that's one of the things that I would say that folks should be mindful of. The other thing I would say be mindful of is to make it work for your agency. The great thing about this structure is it allows us to grow as we grow. So as we grow, we can increase the size of the cohort, we can increase the number of the trainings, we can change, bring in an external partner for parts of the trainings if we need to, but the core of it remains the same. And so it's totally adjustable, according to what we do. And so I would say, create something that works for you with the base components. That's what we've learned going through this. I don't think that we would change anything at this point unless we hear something from our cohort participants, but that is key.
Well, that's a great lead. And so has there been any feedback from the cohort that you think you're going to implement for round 2, or still too early to tell?
Well, what's funny is, they're taking it to places that I didn't think that it was going to go. So, so that's a wonderful thing. I'm just floored by the program, like what they're coming up with, and I'm thinking, how do we keep up with it? How do we now make sure that we're harnessing these really wonderful ideas that are starting to already take root, and make sure that we're making it visible, make sure that we're giving them the time and the space to be able to support that. So far, and I'm just thinking about this one, the folks who are involved with Jim and his policy and advocacy, they are so passionate and they are already applying it to their day-to-day work. So I think, looking at it and how we continue to change is, how do we keep up with what they are wanting to do and making sure that we're giving room and we're making space for it so they don't feel discouraged.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's great. Here, let's see. Were there any knowledge tests or competency tests included throughout the 6 months?
No, we did the assessment at the beginning, and then we're doing the end to see the progress, but we didn't do anything in between except give them the room to innovate, give them the room to partner, give them the room to support each other and to grow and learn, but we didn't do anything else.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And just to reiterate, we really wanted it to feel, we didn't want it to feel like some of those clinical training programs. We wanted it to feel like when, folks like us are going to these leadership and engagement seminars. You're not taking competency exams straight through to test every single piece. You're going and you're engaging, you're networking, and you're growing through doing, in some cases, you're growing through hearing, and really making connections with people and being challenged. So that's the environment that we were looking to create. And I think we've done a great job of it.
And I think that kind of touches on a handful of things that you've mentioned throughout this in terms of messaging. And I'm hearing kind of some inherent like buy-in. And we talked about that a little bit at the beginning, just like the need for it with the current circumstances with macro healthcare. And that's one of the things I love about healthcare is it's inherently mission driven. So everyone that I've met in healthcare has always been very passionate. But for buy-in, was there any needed buy-in for upper management or board, or was it, what did that look like? Also maybe buy-in for, getting people to sign up and volunteer, their time and things like that.
and I don't know if we were just really blessed in this way. Our board is so mission driven. Our board is amazing. They loved this. They love hearing about ways that we're engaging our staff, and especially with everything that's going on. So they've been very mindful of our really, a couple years, our investing in this, both in our time and real dollars, to make sure that our staff felt connected and supported. So this was one part of that, and they were extremely supportive of that. Our leadership team, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. There wasn't a lot of convincing, from the top down, from Dr. DeFabio, myself, every person that's doing a seminar every month, Sam, is a C-suite person. So we are really, through our messaging and in our actions, committed to this. Now, that may not be the same at every organization. So just like any other strategic initiative, any other innovation, you have to make sure that you have buy-in. And I think the fact that we had buy-in and have buy-in at the highest levels, including the board for this agency, made this a really easy thing to do in terms of implementation. The other key messaging is the larger staff. So that's important as well. We wanted it to feel like it was something special, but not make people feel excluded necessarily. We wanted them to aspire to it and to feel like, if my peers are doing this, they're coming back with great feedback, I may want to do this as well. And we're going to continue to look at how we do that as we move forward into the next one, and also using the existing cohort to be able to help to inform that. And so some of the feedback that we'll get at the end will help to direct that messaging, but that's key.
And then just to jump in on that, Melissa, the non-participants, what has been, maybe you can expand upon that a little bit more. I know you don't want them to feel like they're not connected or not participating, but has that created more motivation, or what has been the impact on them? Has it been positive, or what, if you can talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I touched on it a little bit. I mean, they were supportive because they're their peers. And so for a lot of them, they were really, their names were put out there by some of these same folks. So I haven't noticed, now granted, I don't know, there could be some division that I don't know about, but I haven't seen evidence of it. But what I can share is this: on our program, we have what we call our program rounds. And so our program rounds, it's virtual, and this is the way that because we're really spread out in terms of we have about 56 or so locations. We have some folks who are working totally remotely. So the way that we keep in touch are these program rounds. And the program rounds are where some of the mid-level leaders within our agency, they come on and they share what's going on, updates, et cetera. And so there was our last program rounds, we were talking a little bit about what's going on in policy and advocacy, and even what the cohort is doing. And we had folks who are not in the cohort reach out because they wanted to get some sort of presentation for them as well, because it sounded so interesting and it was something that they wanted to be engaged with. So I haven't noticed any division. If anything, I've noticed more kind of interest in how to get connected to it as well. Now we'll see as time goes on, will that develop? But we're trying to be very mindful of not making it feel like it's something that is exclusionary, but it's something that's aspirational.
And we've got another question here from the audience. What is next for the graduates? Like, is there put them on a clear career trajectory? Can they expect more responsibilities or higher pay, et cetera? Like, what does that look like internally?
So I would say it depends. I said, there's something very clear and already defined about what is going to happen as a result of the cohort. So as a result of their being in the cohort, they will get their leadership plan. So each one will have a leadership plan based on what they demonstrated throughout the cohort, throughout the 6-month period, throughout the 6-month course, what they asked for at the very beginning, and then where they ended up. So there'll be a leadership development plan, and this is a part of our strategy, this documented for Acenda as part of Advance. It will go to their supervisor. So their supervisor will then be held accountable for helping them to manage through that plan. Now, for some people, their different ideas of where to go and how they want to grow might be different. They may decide that there's another part in the agency that now they're really interested in and they want to develop into. There are some who are going to aspire to higher positions, but some may not, but that's okay too. Everybody might not necessarily want to be an executive level leader. They want to be more effective in what they do, and that's fine as well. So it really is designed to be customized, not a one size fit all where we want everyone to move into the C-suite. We want everyone to move into senior leadership, but we want you as leaders to be as effective as you can wherever you are. And then hopefully you'll stay with us. Hopefully you'll keep those skills as you grow and you'll stay with us. And then hopefully then you'll be able to continue to grow and innovate. That's going to help to make the agency even stronger. And then you're going to help to bring others along with you as well. So it really is going to depend on the person.
And then what all do you think about the 6-month timeline? Do you feel like 6 months has been a good amount of time? And then a second part of that question would be, are you doing this twice a year, or is it 6 months on, 6 months off? Like what do y'all anticipate?
Yeah, 6 months on and 6 months off. So again, so this was designed to work within our kind of an environment where we didn't want it to feel too much. And these are folks that I mean, they got a lot of stuff going on already. So they're already hard at work. And so we wanted it to be really portable, really easy, and them to feel like they have a little bit of breathing room. So the 6 months on will allow them in a very concentrated amount of time to get what they need, spread out over 6 months, what some of us might do in, like, 2 weeks or something like that, but really give them the feel of it and be able to engage with each other. And then once it's over, be able to breathe, get everybody else excited. So, we have 6 months off, so talk it up a little bit. And then by the time the next nominations come around, there's a little bit more excitement. It allows us to message a little bit differently and allows us to get people on board differently. So it gives a little bit of breathing room for not just the cohort participants, but also for the agency as a whole to be able to build up to that next time, instead of making it a year long or, just 10 months. I mean, that really is too much at a certain point. So 6 months seemed a good way to really hone in and then give the agency time to breathe and get excitement for the next group of people who may want to come in for the next cohort.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
As the program evolves, is there situations that might increase the amount of employees that will be a part of the program, maybe decrease? Is there even thoughts around that and how that evolves in the future and what may impact it?
We haven't necessarily talked about that yet, David. I think if the agency grows and as we continue to grow, we may go back and look at the number. Is that the right number then? So, if we were to, let's just say, double in size, I'm just making something up. If we were to double in size, 10 may be too small considering what we have going on. 6 months may be not long enough or too long. I mean, who knows? So I think right now we're gonna stay in this space. But absolutely, though, we are open to continuing to assess it, and we have to, or else we're being hypocrites to why we started this in the first place. We have to be able to innovate and pivot depending on how the needs of the agency might change. So absolutely, I think that's something that any of us should be open to considering if we were doing something like this.
Okay, great. I think, yeah, sorry, I'm just making sure I'm caught up on all the questions over here. I think I've hit everything from the audience. I mean, I think we have a couple minutes to make some closing questions here. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen real quick. Show my screen. What all are you seeing right here? Are you seeing the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we've got a couple of announcements. First, there will be no Circle Elite Executive Roundtable next week because we have the Executive Leadership Retreat, and you will be able to participate in all of these sessions led by all these wonderful people. I see a couple of familiar faces on there. Melissa, I don't know if you want to give a quick plug for next week, what you'll be talking about.
Sure, thank you so much. So next week, we're actually going to go into a little bit more detail about the context that I talked about today. So Acenda Advance is a component of a larger agency strategy around developing our leaders. So we're going to be talking a lot about that. And hopefully it's not going to just be me talking at everyone. Hopefully we're going to get some really good conversation going, but that's where it's going to be, the big picture. How did Acenda Advance, what did Acenda Advance come out of? What was the context? So it should be fun, it should be good.
Perfect. And this is the one where I get a lot of positive feedback on all of our events, but this is the one where people seem to really remember. I think it's gonna be really cool. There's also a couple of virtual events that you can participate in. So if you can't make it in person, check out the virtual events. You can register at leadership.openminds.com. And our last announcement is, so Thursday after next on September 30th, we're going to be joined again by Ross Robinson. And he's going to be talking about the Hill Country case study and addressing all the unique challenges that comes with trying to provide healthcare to rural and hard to reach areas. So I think it's going to be really exciting. Please consider joining us. You can register on the Open Minds website under the events tab labeled Executive Roundtables. And Melissa, wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. David, thank you as well. Thanks everyone for joining us. We appreciate your engagement, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
All right.